We got a little drama here because we had Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's out. We had 4 quarterbacks this year. We all know that. But things are clicking. Joe Flacco's had a lot of yards. His picks have been a bit of an issue, but he's been pretty dynamic. He's thrown for a lot of yards. Again, I think 254 something, 300, 374 yards. He's had good games. And the question is arising. Are the Browns better off right this season? I'm not saying 3 years from now, but this season in a vacuum, are the Browns better off with Joe Flacco than they would have been if Deshaun Watson was playing?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the whole moving forward for a bit, because let's just cover that for a minute. Absolutely not, because he is older, and there are some people that are like, oh yeah, like Joe Flacco, we should just sign him. And okay, let's slow down just a little bit. Okay, he is about to be 39. Okay, let's slow down a little bit. And look, you saw a little bit of that downside. We did mention that Joe Flacco's been a guy that the longer he's played, the more he comes down to earth a bit. So not overall surprising, but overall, if I'm going to have to give an answer on this season, I do think Joe Flacco is the better answer. I think Watson, again, he has real trouble with his anticipatory throws. He always had a good running game when he was playing. He never had some of these games where he had trouble with the run game like we've had recently. Some games are like that. And he's never had that and still had a lot of trouble in most of his games. I do think you need those anticipatory throws, like I mentioned before. Sooner or later, you have to make them. Joe Flacco is able to make them. Joe Flacco seems to understand the system better, and he seems to be better able to make those big plays when you need them. Admittedly, he's definitely had his downside, but Deshaun Watson didn't really play mistake-free this year either.
Yeah, I was going to say, Deshaun Watson also had his downsides.
So I don't want to feel that, and the fact that Flacco's been able to connect with more receivers is extremely important. Mm-hmm. But yes, of course you're using Cooper and Njoku, of course. But Tillman's making more of an impact. Elijah Moore, this week not as much, but other weeks he's made a big play. And this week he had one big play, but other weeks he's made multiple plays. And Cedric Tillman making multiple plays. All of a sudden he's making plays. So
4 catches for Tillman.
Yeah, David Bell had a big touchdown catch. It's not that he's all the time, but every once in a while you can get those other contributors in different games. That really helps, because sometimes if you just have one guy, they're just going to double cover him. You need to be able to hit other people in those moments, and Joe Flacco being able to do that allows us to stay dangerous throughout the game. And like even if Mark Cooper's out, or he's just not having his best game, or he's just he's having a medium game, but the defenders are having a great game, and there's double teaming him, you need to be able to reach multiple people. And Flacco's able to do that. He's able to read defenses. He's clearly a better fit for the Stefanski offense. So at this moment, I would have to say Joe Flacco. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's crazy to say. It feels crazy to say. But when you look at this from an honest standpoint, I think you have to say that Joe Flacco is the better option for the Browns this year specifically. Yes, because it's possible that next year Deshaun Watson will have finally been back long enough and he would have finally been integrated into the offense and it'd be that Deshaun Watson. But I think this decision is genuinely only feels controversial and feels crazy because of Deshaun Watson's name. Going off of this year, the floor of Deshaun Watson versus the floor of Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson's been way lower. Deshaun Watson's floor has been awful. His floor has been looking like a backup. Joe Flacco's floor has been looking like an okay bridge quarterback, like a low-tier bridge quarterback. But Joe Flacco's high has also been higher, I think, than Deshaun Watson's high for over the course of the game. Deshaun Watson's had halves where he was like really, really good. But I think over the course of the game, I think it's also arguable that Joe Flacco's had better highs as a whole, like has better high games. Because they've both had games where they played really well, like a high completion percentage, threw for a good amount of yards. But they've also both had those interceptions. So I think, yes, Joe Flacco's had those interceptions and those downsides in his games where he was really good. But so did Deshaun Watson. So I think when you look at it, Joe Flacco's got a higher floor this year, higher floor, better ceiling. The offense is definitively, statistically, the eye test, more dynamic. And as you said, it's more spread out. There's more players involved. Cedric Tillman's had 4 grabs this week. That's not exactly a Herculean effort, but that's practically as much as he had in the 6 games before, or however many games it was, I forget. Sorry, off the top of my head. And however many games it was before Joe Flacco stepped in. In the games where Deshaun Watson played, Cedric Tillman had, 1 catch, maybe? 2 catches? And Cedric Tillman had 4 this week. I think he had 4 last week. He's actually a part of the offense. He's not a big part of the offense, but he's a part of the offense. And that's not something we saw before, and he's a rookie. There's only so much we're going to get from him. And Cedric Tillman's actually looked pretty decent. I think that Joe Flacco has done a better job with that. And another thing, as you touched on, is anticipating throws. That's something that Deshaun Watson simply wasn't doing, which I think is partly why we have this upside that Joe Flacco has that Deshaun Watson hasn't shown this year, is because for Deshaun Watson, the play needs to already be drawn up in there, and the player's open, and then he'll make the throw. But Joe Flacco, he'll have plays like Deshaun Watson in that play, that key moment from the game, that changed everything. to Amari Cooper. Deshaun Watson doesn't make that throw. And I don't think that's controversial to say. Deshaun Watson does not make that throw. He simply doesn't do it. He doesn't have that kind of anticipation, and I think that kind of veteran presence to make that throw. Potentially he doesn't have the arm strength either, because Joe Flacco had to put a lot of zip on that ball. If that ball hung a little bit more, it would have been picked off. And that was a pretty deep ball. Now, it was a pretty deep ball. It was also a pretty deep ball. I don't think that's the throw Deshaun Watson makes. And I think with the kind of defense that the Browns have, having that upside, that dynamism where we could have a 50-yard play, we could have a game where we have multiple plays over 40 yards, that is so valuable for this team. And last week, I said, I think after this game, my prediction was, and I think I predicted like 28-10, which didn't exactly happen, but I predict that after this game, we're going to start talking about the Browns as potentially being able to win a playoff game. And I think that turned out to be true. I think after you saw that performance from Joe Flacco, I think you do feel like there's a chance they could win a playoff game. It's not out of the question. They do have a chance to not just make the playoffs, but actually make a splash in the playoffs. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Feel free to let us know. If you're listening on Spotify, obviously you can't let us know, but if there's on YouTube, feel free to comment, tell us what you think, or give us a follow on Twitter.